This is critical thinking on the integumentary system lab. So let's look at the questions, where here you have an image and you are asked to identify the incorrect statement with respect to this structure, which has been shown by the arrow. Here we have a skin condition, which is from your links in your lecture notes on the various skin conditions. So this has something to do with that. And then this question is to do with wound healing. So let's look at the first one, where it asks you to identify the incorrect statement with respect to the structure marked A. So here what I'm basically trying to show you also is, first is you need to be able to identify the structure, and secondly you need to know its function. So therefore if you know both, then you will be able to come to the right choice. So let's look at, first let's identify this structure here. This is a sebaceous gland, which is always associated with a hair follicle. So what you see here, this is a hair follicle, and the center is empty. This part is empty only because that hair has been removed. And let's also look at some of the other structures that we see here. This arrow points to a portion of the erector pylorum muscle. So this is muscle tissue, as you see here, and this arrow is pointing to the sebaceous gland. So now let's look at the possible choices. Its secretions lubricate the hair follicle. This is a true statement. That's why this is always seen very close to a hair follicle, because when it secretes, the secretions pour into the hair follicle and lubricate it. It will be absent in thick skin. This is also true because hair follicles are absent in thick skin, and sebaceous glands therefore are also absent in thick skin, for example in the palms and soles of the feet. So therefore this is correct. Its contraction makes the hair shaft erect. This is wrong, because this is a gland, and its contraction does not make the hair shaft erect. The hair shaft is made erect by this structure, which is the erector pylorum muscle. So therefore this is the incorrect statement. But let's go further down and look at the last choice, which says during secretion the entire cell is lost. That is true, because this sebaceous gland is what is called a holocrine gland. So holocrine glands are glands where the cells are completely disrupted when the secretion occurs. So therefore in this question, this is the incorrect statement, and therefore the answer to this question. While we are on this, I would also like to show you thick skin and show you how you don't see any hair follicles, and hence you don't see any sebaceous glands. So this is one slide of thick skin. This is really taken from your tissues lab, where you had to look at stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. So look at the stratification here and look at this thick layer of keratin. So you can see that, you don't see in the dermis, you don't see any hair follicles, and you don't see any sebaceous glands. You will always see sweat glands though. And here again another section of thick skin where you can see the keratin. And here this is the rest of the layers of the epidermis, and again in the dermis you do not see any sebaceous glands or hair follicles. Now if we were to go back and look at thin skin, and this is showing melanin, let's look at sweat hair follicles. So this is again showing you hair follicles, and I want to show you. So here again is, well, it doesn't show you the top layer, but then again this is thin skin taken from the histoweb, and again you can see that these are sebaceous glands. Notice all these cells, the way they look, it's kind of got a very spongy appearance, and this is the follicle which is empty here, and here again this is the erector pylorum muscle. So let's now look at the next question, which shows you, again you have to first identify the condition and then only you'll be able to answer this. So the condition shown here has a good prognosis because, and this is a rodent ulcer, as you can see here, which is also known as basal cell carcinoma. So rodent ulcer is also called basal cell carcinoma, and this is in your notes in the skin conditions link. So this has a good prognosis Not because it arises from the basal cells. Basal cell carcinoma does arise from the basal cells, but that's not why it has a good prognosis. Has a good prognosis means it is not dangerous. So this is therefore not the right answer. It arises from the superficial cells. First, this does not arise from the superficial cells. Squamous cell carcinoma arises from that. And even if it did, that's not why it is not dangerous. It resolves on its own. This carcinoma does not resolve on its own. Hemangiomas are the ones which are strawberry nevi as they are called. These are the ones which resolve on their own. So therefore this is not the right answer. This one, it does not spread through lymphatics and blood. This is the right answer. Any condition is called dangerous, any kind of carcinoma, when it metastatizes, and the word is metastasis, which means that it spreads, because if it spreads, it can go to distant areas. So melanomas or malignant melanomas, those are considered dangerous because they spread through lymphatics and blood. This one does not. So therefore, it has a good prognosis because it does not spread through lymphatics and blood. Let's now look at the last question, which is on wound healing. And again, here you have to identify which of the stages of wound healing is shown here, and based on that you answer this question. So it says, which of the following events occurs during the stage of wound healing shown here? So this stage of wound healing, so what you see first of all is that you can see the epidermis up here. The epithelium has been completely renewed. You can see the blood vessels also are clear and they have joined together. What you can see are some fibroblasts, and you can see some fresh cells here which looks something, fresh collagen laid down here which looks like scar tissue. So now let's look at the choices. So it says, in this stage of wound healing shown here, vasodilation formed by formation of a clot. It says that will this occur here? This is wrong, because this is in the first stage of wound healing, which is the inflammatory phase, where you see the clot formed up here, and so you'll see this clot, and that's because the blood vessels dilate, blood pours into the wound, and then a clot is formed. Now you don't see any of that, so therefore that is not the right answer. The second one, which is capillary budding, occurs and the basal cells divide. Now this occurs in the second stage, which is the proliferative stage, and you don't see that here. In the proliferative stage, what happens is the wound is still, the gap is still not filled. These cells begin to grow towards it to fill the gap, and these capillaries are actually broken off. When there's a wound, the capillaries have been divided, they break off and they kind of come close to each other to join. And that's what is happening here. On the other hand, what you're seeing is that the capillaries are fine. There is continuity in the capillaries. So therefore, this is not the right answer. So this is not that. And the third one, which says new collagen is formed and scar tissue is seen. And this is the last stage, which is the remodeling phase. And that is what is seen here. So you can see this is the area of new collagen and where scar tissue. So you can see this area is where scar tissue is formed. You can see everything has otherwise come back. The wound surface has healed up here. The blood vessels are continuous. So this looks more or less normal. So this is the last stage of wound healing, and therefore that is the correct answer for this. So if you get a question on wound healing, you can't say first, second or third stage. You have to identify them as inflammatory, proliferative or remodeling phases.